Hi, Yinnies, and welcome to a Yin Yoga podcast. If you are new around here, welcome. If you are familiar, welcome back, friends. Thank you so much for those of you who have been leaving reviews. It really warms my heart to see that this podcast is making a difference. And also, it makes a big difference in the reach of the podcast. So when you go on to Spotify or Apple or wherever you listen and you offer some stars, and on Apple, you can also leave a written review. That really helps the algorithms know that this podcast is impacting people, that it's making a difference, that it is important to share with other people. And I wanted to read one of those now before we get into today's episode. One more reminder, dear listeners, before I read this, is that this is an adult podcast with adult language. And so you may hear some colorful language from me, perhaps my guest. So if you have small people around, headphones now. Okay, this is a podcast review by PJ Freebird. I stumbled across this looking for a yin podcast, and I got the jackpot. Her outlook and way of explaining topics is clear and down to earth, with language that is easy to comprehend. She encourages her listeners to be curious and strive to learn always, and question the narrative of why, which is fundamental. Of why, which is fundamental in today's training. Why do we carry the language and catchphrases that are outdated and untrue from teacher to teacher? Educate ourselves on definitions, benefits, and history. Education on anatomy is critical. And also, can we soften to teach our students to have their own beautiful practices that serve them and not us? Oh, person after my own heart here. Love it, and give this a listen. So much of what she says aligns with my values and beliefs. So this is a breath of fresh air. Thank you so much. If you have not yet and you've been listening for a while and you want to add a review, I'd be super grateful. On Spotify, you can just do stars, 5 stars. On Apple, you can do stars and or a written review. Okay, I'm going to talk quickly because I'm excited and my guest will be here shortly. But today, drum roll, on the podcast, my friends, is Gil fucking Hedley. Yes, I swore. That's how excited I am. I'll talk a bit more about my how I found Gil and stuff like that when he's here, but his bio. Gil started out his adult learning journey at the Divinity School of the University of Chicago. While studying for his PhD in theological ethics, during that time, he also became a certified Rolfer and spent 5 years studying psychodynamics and energy healing in New York City. He has been an avid student of personal and spiritual development his whole life. His combined interests and trainings have supported his personal exploration of the human body and led him to develop an integral approach to the study of human anatomy. Integral anatomy looks beyond regions to explore and appreciate the whole body and whole body continuities and relationships of the textural layers into which that first embryonic cell has differentiated. Integral anatomy sees nature as mirror reflecting itself rather than other, and it looks to develop an understanding of the whole person as well as the whole body. Over the past 27 years, Gil has led hundreds of hours of hands-on human dissection workshops in the laboratory. Through hands-on human dissection workshops in the laboratory and lecture and presentations around the world, he has encouraged thousands of fellow somanauts to appreciate, explore, and embody the wonders of the human form. He has published a number of books, created online access through live stream courses and hundreds of hours of high-quality video dissection process, and produced the Integral Anatomy series, a set of 4 feature-length videos documenting his whole layer-by-layer approach through on-camera dissection. Through his in-person work, as well as a keynote presentations and online programs, he's encouraged thousands of again, fellow Solmanauts, to explore and embody the wonders of the human form. His material is available at gilhedley.com. There will be a link in the show notes. And his current intention is to bring integral anatomy to the world via online courses, presentations, and content design to cultivate a deeper experience and appreciation of the human form for all of those who share an interest in the gift of the human body. Okay, so that's Gil's official bio. Like I mentioned, I'm so excited to connect with Gil. So excited that I'm having to have like a really chill tea to drink so that I don't get talking a mile a minute. And the next time that you hear from me, I'll be here with Gil. Hi, Gil. I'm so excited that you're here with me. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us.
My pleasure, Nick. Thanks for having me.
What I would love to start with before we get into all things fascia and that goodness is your transition from like a divinity school and then became a rolfer, which that makes very much a lot of sense with what you do now. I can definitely see that correlation. But then when did you start to, maybe we'll start with why did you decide to become a rolfer? How long did you do that for before you started doing what you're doing now?
So I was in graduate school as an ethics PhD candidate. I spent 8 years at the University of Chicago. And, while I was there, I was very disembodied. Started doing Tai Chi. That got me grounded a bit. And learned about Rolfing, ultimately. Got Rolfed, went to the Rolf Institute while I was still doing my PhD. And so they kind of overlapped as I moved into the bodywork field from this very intellectual world of the Divinity School of the University of Chicago. It's a very meta place where you're provoked out of your body just through your constant mental and intellectual processing. And so, my venturing into all things the body was very much a conscious attempt to embody myself, realizing that I was disembodied in the worst way. And then I had to get back into this vehicle somehow because I was floating above it.
That is so easy. I'm sure anybody who's studied in depth for anything can relate to that. It's so easy to get
it's
so
just
up in your head. Yeah.
You pop right out and no one cares. Everyone's happy with you. We're all floating around having these discussions and no one's talking about the body. I felt that to be, as an ethicist, and particularly I was interested in issues around marriage and family in my studies. And I was like, there's all kinds of pontification going on here around the body and what's right and wrong with respect to the body. And no one even knows what it is. No one's ever been in one who's having this discussion. Maybe I would do well to be an honest ethicist, to dive in and experience life in human form. What does the body have to say to the ethicist, as opposed to what does the ethicist have to say to the body? And that's kind of where my whole career launched, was in this deep inquiry into, what's the body have to say? It has to say a lot, actually.
Yes, so many things, all the things. Did you initially seek out Rolfing just based on a referral? Did you like what? It's because it's not the most common. I mean, massage is common.
No, it's not. And I used to give these Tai Chi massages and to family and friends, and I saw a tremendous change happen in my mother's body. And I was like, what happened to you? So I'd come home on a Christmas vacation or something from grad school. And she said, I got Rolfed. And I was like, oh, I got to learn more about that. So I read Ida Rolf's book, and I was like, oh, how interesting. She was an educator and a healer. And that kind of turned me on. I was like, I like that combination of talents. I think I might have that combination of talents. And so I admired Ida Rolf. I didn't know anything about Rolfing at all. I didn't really care. I was just like, I want to be like that lady, because she's cool. And so, when I approached the Rolf Institute, I was like, I want to be a Rolfer. They're like, well, have you been Rolfed? I was like, no. I would like, well, like as an intellectual, I'm like, what would that have to do with anything? And like, well, go get Rolfed and come talk to us. So,
Nice,
you
nice.
know.
And so you were correct. You got Rolfed and you were like more intrigued, and that's why you decided to become a Rolfer.
Actually, my Rolfing series made me question whether I should be a Rolfer. Turns out I'm sort of a hypermobile person, and it kind of knocked me out a little bit. And
Mm,
I needed maybe a different kind of work. So I did train and become a certified Rolfer, and wanted to. Then now I'm a professional putting my hands on people, and I was like, now I really need to learn some anatomy in a much more deep way. So I I was like, well, I'm Dr. Hedley. I called up a lab. I was like, this is Dr. Hedley. I'd like a cadaver, please. So I met up with this guy running a lab, and we hit it off. And the next thing you know, I was running a dissection lab for some other rolfers. And I just went deeper and deeper into that, and became my passion, was to share what I was learning about the body with people and to guide them in, experiential processes that would bring them to their next personal and professional level.
that is so cool. And so you started kind of, doing that for your own knowledge and then sharing that with fellow Rolfers. And then, I mean, now you've got like people from all industries that come and
Yes,
do this work
exactly.
with you. Yeah.
Yeah, I just started out with the Rolf Institute's directory, and I literally would cold call people and say, I've got a body in a lab this week. Do you want to come and dissect with me? And then I branched out to advertising to massage therapists. I did that for some years at the beginning of my career. And then in around 2003, I was like, I'll never advertise again. And then the word of mouth became
Mm-hmm.
the thing. And so for the last 21 years, I haven't advertised except to just mail my mailing list and announce my schedule, announce it on Facebook or something. But I don't advertise in magazines. I find that the universe sorts people for class way better than a magazine ad ever could. Um,
Yes.
so when people say, I had this experience, and they share it, and then people become intrigued. So it's been really a word of mouth career, which has been awesome. And of course, I don't just do the dissections anymore. Now I have a massive website where I teach, online, and also
Yeah.
travel and lecture. So
We will dive into some more of that too. Um, I love that you said that. Sorry, I'm also a bit of a business geek, and I love that you said that you don't advertise anymore because word of mouth has brought you what you need. And I mean, that's the ideal way to meet new clients, right? Is that
yeah,
they know somebody who's already raved about you. It's yeah, that's the way we all want to get to, where it's
yeah,
like,
and it's a nice filter too, because if you just say you're offering a dissection workshop, in some people's minds, that will mean a very sterile,
mm-hmm,
objectifying, and objective pursuit of knowledge. My class is very personally engaging and personally demanding. I want the whole person to show up, not just their intellect. And I want to, as a result of having the whole person show up, have not just intellectual, but personally transformative experiences in a lab. So that you come away as a transformed person, not just a person who has more words in their mouth about body parts or something like that. That wouldn't be integral anatomy. Now, integral anatomy is an attempt not only to investigate the relationships and continuities of the human form, but also to meet that inquiry from a whole person perspective. So I want the emotions and the intellect and the soul and spirit involved, not just it's not just a vocabulary lesson.
um I'm in Canada, and back way back, I'm Gen X, so it was a little while ago when I was in high school. Our last level of biology, if you took it, it was optional at that point. The only people that took it were people that were wanting to continue in that field in university.
Mm.
And I did not take that course simply because there was a human dissection visit. And it felt it felt cold and mechanical to me. I just couldn't imagine, just seeing a body and having my professor talk about it and like cut parts off. I mean, I didn't even do the frog dissection in bio. I like was sick that day, air quotes. Because I was just like, no, like this was a living thing that now you, by the way, you just killed for this. So I wanted no part of it. And, when I've been teaching yoga for just over 20 years at this point. And so lots of people have said, are you ever going to do a dissection? Are you ever? And I was always like a hard no. Until, so I was introduced to you from my teacher, Paul Grilley. And is the fuzz video, which I have a question about later. So I'll save maybe too much about that for in a bit, but that's how I was introduced to you. And then of course I went home, and because that's what you do when you're in teacher training, you write down names of things and books, and you go home and you nerd out and you watch all the videos and you do all the things. And so I've been on your email list for quite a while and subscribed to your YouTube channel. And I have personally probably been responsible for all of the shares on the video that you made about cellulite, by the way. Which just again warmed my heart as far as just who you are as a person. And I can link that in the show notes, so that those that are like, what, I'll link it so people can watch it.
I'll talk.
Go ahead.
That's one of the rare videos that I actually took down.
Did you?
Or I paused it, actually. I paused it. I could restart it up at any time. But I took serious umbrage in that video in a non-explicit way about a particular person and product that I felt was extremely effective. And that person took umbrage.
I think I know what you mean.
And I thought, well, you deserve to be taken umbrage of, because snake oil should be called out. And at the same time, I felt, okay, is it in my character style, to even sideways disparage someone and their work? And so I took it down. I need to redo it. I need to speak to the issue of cellulite, which I can do right here at any point that you like.
Let's do it
without taking out true believers in vicious products that are wrong-headed in every possible way. But cellulite is just a folk language, and it's a disparaging type of folk language referencing the patterning that appears on the skin from the underlying adipose layer that belongs there, and that can be transparent at the skin in the same way that your muscle tissue can be transparent on someone who's very thin. Your bones can be transparent in someone who has bony deformations or is very thin. Your viscera are transparent on someone who has built up and who presents their morphology in kind of the gut. And those people, and they are the majority, the great majority of people who present their external morphology from the fatty layer immediately deep to the dermis. Why have we singled out the transparency of that layer to be somehow wrong in our culture? I'll tell you why. Because we love to problematize normal anatomy and then make people feel bad about themselves and sell them solutions. So we commodify the solution to a made-up problem. And if we lived in a culture where kneecaps were considered offensive and that you can actually see your kneecaps, everyone would wear clothing over their kneecap. Or if their kneecap were revealed, you would hope that you wouldn't see that gross, weird bone shape there. Oh, yuck. So it's like, well, you're going to get rid of cellulite just as quickly as you're going to get rid of your kneecap. We're just talking about normal anatomy here. It's more presenting in female bodies because female bodies have more fat, and that's just a
Yes.
math problem. It's not to say that any particular female body relative to some particular male body will be balanced out that way, but if you're into averages, then we can look and see there's a general propensity to have more fatty tissue on the female form than on a male form. It's a hormonal phenomenon. It's not, there's nothing wrong with it. And because of that, there'll be a higher likelihood of transparency of the lobular structure of that layer at the skin. And that's just life. When we see it on a baby, we love it. We kiss it. We no, we squish their thighs together, and we see all the cottage cheese, and you love your baby, and you love their dimpling. And when we see the same thing in an adult, we say, "Oh my God, you've got cellulite, and here's 5,000 ways that I can make it go away." And it's like trying to make your shin go away. It's like, it's not going to go away. And people say, oh, it's dehydration. It's all this pathology. They pathologize what is actually just the transparency of the underlying fascial layer. And if you stop pathologizing it, you wouldn't have to solve a problem. There wouldn't be a problem. And you just live your life and kiss your adult cottage cheese the same way you kiss your baby's ass.
Yeah. If, and I'm going to speak just from a woman's perspective, because that's the only perspective I can speak of in this lifetime. That of course we are inundated with creams and gadgets and things and diets and all the stuff to get rid of that. And from when I was younger, it was from the time I was a teen. It's probably even younger now, the way the media works. And
yeah,
if anyone's listening to this and they're kind of having a bit of an aha with this, I would just, to me, I'm always like, follow the money. Like,
yeah,
who wants you to hate your cellulite? The people trying to sell you the stuff to get rid of your cellulite.
that's right. And if they would just shut the fuck up and love on all of our bodies, we'd be so much better off. We'd have young girls not hating themselves or starving themselves, not adult women ashamed of their bodies, afraid to go into a hot tub. It's all just sad. But the thing is, it's also up to us to grow up relative to our culture, right? So if we buy the bullshit, then, well, you get what you pay for. So we have to stop buying what's being sold to us. And I mean at a metaphorical, philosophical, and the body perspective of our culture. If you just look at history, you see that what is appreciated changes over time.
Yes.
And what culture and changes what is appreciated over time. So Western culture has always been ambivalent towards this layer. You can follow the history of Western culture and see that there's always been an ambivalence around fat that you don't see in China or in Africa, where there's just a wholehearted love. But here we have an ambivalent relationship. So, Henry VIII was a big man at some point in his life, and we see that as the shape of a king. But when he couldn't ride his horse, now he's emasculated. So there's like an ambivalence. There's, a big man is great, but if you're so big that you can't, walk or ride your horse anymore, then something's now you're out. So, the fat of the land is a way of describing its richness. So richness and wealth is in that word, fat of the land, but it's the maidservant who handles the greasy pots and pans, not the lord of the manor, right? Because grease, the servants deal with the grease, because it's low, right? So there's constant ambivalence. And even Titian, who sometimes people in their defense of this layer will cite Titian and say, look at that in the old master paintings, they loved fat. Well, Titian was considered to be a little weird in his day, drawing those large naked people. And they're like, what's going on with Titian? He's really into the big girls. And then, so they were ambivalent even then, that style of portraiture, while at the same time appreciating it, right? So it's gone back and forth the whole time. If you look at Sun-Maid Raisin Lady in 1935, she's a Zaftig, big-breasted, big arms, holding a bunch of grapes. That's Italian ideal. I worked on a garbage truck in the 70s and late 70s, early 80s with these Italian family. And they were straight off the boat, Italian speaking people. And when we were driving down the road and my boss saw, a full figured gal on the sidewalk, he was honking the air horn
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
screaming out the window, cheering her on. Some skinny ladies walking by, he had no interest. So, so there's those cultural differences. He had no ambivalence. He liked flesh. You look
Yeah.
Indian, South Asian Indian with the midriff in this way the sari is wrapped. That's to expose the roll of fat on the belly and demonstrate your sexiness,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
It's not overt. Here we are only allowed to have fat in our breast tissues and on our hips. Everywhere else, forget it. But what a surprise it comes when you're in the dissection lab and you realize it's all just one layer. It's one continuous whole body layer. It's not like it's portioned out here and here. So the bodybuilding women will completely strip down that layer, and their breasts and ass will disappear, and then they'll get inserts put in. They'll muscle up their ass and they'll put breast implants in after they've completely modified their bodies so that they don't have that tissue anymore. They change their hormonal balance.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
So yeah, I think if you ever do redo the video, let me know and but I think that for me, the other weird thing that I've heard, of course, just as someone being born and raised female, I've heard lots about cellulite my whole life. But not too long ago, and I'll just leave the name of the book and author over there. I read a Yin Yoga book where there was a section on how to get rid of cellulite. And I was horrified because there has been not nearly enough, but at least there's an attempt in the last, I would say, decade in the yoga world to start to become more body positive. And so for a book like that to come out now, or not long ago, that horrified me. But what horrified me even more was the statement made about the cellulite, and that was that cellulite is a sign or representation of poor boundaries.
Wow.
Right? Like, huh?
That's that's some deep projection going on there. And I would beg to differ.
Yeah, it was it actually, because I do review Yin books, and it actually, the rest of the book was great. That one part I was like, no, we're out.
We got to give each other space. Not everybody gets everything exactly right. So wouldn't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater there.
Right,
But
because otherwise, a great book.
Yeah, and just folks, again, now I feel all the more impetus to put out to revive the Cellulite video, just to educate. It's so important to educate about these things because people just haven't thought about it. If you're just in the culture, that's what our culture says. Our culture is full of hate for the body in so many different ways. Again, in that literally a marketing effort to problematize every layer of the body in a way that will kind of make us run to the store for the creams, the lotions, the potions, the gizmos, in order to correct our mistaken body that somehow don't appear as some weird, ideal, imagined form that doesn't exist to anyone and never will. And if you can always keep your customer disappointed at a certain level, they'll keep buying.
Yeah, I agree. What really kind of started my brain acknowledging this was years ago. I watched a documentary called Killing Us Softly, which again I can link below for anyone who needs. But just watching her break down sort of marketing and media and just all of the stuff that's like right in front of you, but that you don't see until somebody
it's literally
points it
the
out.
water we swim in.
Yeah.
It's a constant drumbeat of brainwashing that goes on from childhood. Like you said, when you're just a little girl, you're picking up all these cues about what's good and bad about your body. Inadvertent comments, just things you hear said, off to the side that register into your subconscious and then become a way to negatively identify with your body.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe we've sparked an interest in you when you have time, to do a redo of the
Yeah.
cellulite video. Um, and I was introduced to you again, I mentioned through Paul Grilley, through the fuzz video, and then of course just started
Oh,
following your work.
wonderful, beautiful Paul Grilley.
Yes, my teacher, I love him. I
Yeah.
adore him and Susie. They're just
Yeah,
amazing
they're a
salt of
great
the
couple.
earth
We
people.
had a
Yeah.
wonderful breakfast with them when we went through Ashland on a nerve tour.
Yay. So that's where I first discovered you, was through the fuzz video. And then of course I started subscribing to your YouTube. I got on your newsletter, et cetera, et cetera. And then fast forward to 2020. And when we were all I'm just going to say sheltering in place, because I don't like any of the terms for that.
I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah, all of it is madness to me. And so, here I am sheltering in place, and I get an email from you saying that you were going to be doing, part of, not the whole thing, but part of a dissection on
Yeah.
Zoom. And I think that was the first time that you did that. Am I right?
It is. I
On
did it,
Zoom,
and I
yeah.
only did it twice, and that was it. It was kind of a two-off thing.
And so I was right in there because and the reason that I think that there was this inkling to give it a shot, even though I said earlier I didn't take Bio 30 because I didn't want to have the human body be cut apart and dealt with coldly, was because I already had built up this connection with you and the way you see things. And so I was like, okay, well, if I'm ever gonna dip my toe in this, Gil would be the guy to do this with. And so I did sign up, and it was great actually to see all of a sudden, we'd all be logging onto Zoom, and as you were all setting up, you'd be seeing in the chat who was there, and it would be like, oh my gosh, there's my friend, there's another friend, there's a friend. It was like a little reunion of yoga teachers happening in there.
Great.
And I absolutely loved that experience. And it's so amazing to see, an actual body versus drawings in a book.
Yeah.
And a couple of the key takeaways, there were so many takeaways from that. But one thing that I just want to mention about you and my gratitude towards that experience was, first of all, there was somebody that in the comments that had mentioned something about the woman's size, amount of adipose tissue. And you were right away just like, this is a normal, healthy amount of adipose tissue. Like, what are you talking about, kind of thing, which I loved. And then there was a part in there where, there were so many takeaways, but I could talk about a whole episode on that, but we won't. Where each of those of you that were doing the work, so to speak, that we were all witnessing on Zoom, paused to, I guess, cradle would maybe be the word.
Honor,
yes, to hold the person who had given their body to you's heart. And there was this pause in reverence, and it was so palpable, even through a Zoom screen, because each of you did, and you paused, and there was just so much respect given to the heart, to that moment. I get verklempt just talking about it even now. I'm a softie. And
you're not a softie, you're connected to your heart.
Very much, yes.
Let's honor that rather than spank it.
I usually say I'm leaky, meaning, I'm easily moved to tears.
Me too.
My bestie and I call it that. So, I was watching it and crying, and I just thought it was so incredibly beautiful. And so I'm very grateful that my first experience, not even in person, but just with seeing this process on Zoom even, was with you, because I think that it would have been quite different if I just went somewhere else where it was here's this muscle, here's this, here's, which you
cut
do.
Cut it out and weigh it.
Which you do talk about all the parts, of course. Yes. But there's just such a different reverence there.
So I have a commitment to context. I think that's part of integral anatomy, is that I have a deep commitment to context. So there is no part that isn't part of a whole. And so, you can never understand the part if you're not paying attention to the whole. And you can never understand a heart without paying attention to the person to whom it gave life.
Mhm.
So it just wouldn't make sense to me.
I think it's so beautiful too when you do work like that, that you can learn so much. And of course, there's just as many questions left about that person's journey as a human before they got to you, just with, their anatomy and scars or injuries, or just like, all of the things that
Yeah.
that physically represent. I not long ago had a surprise gallbladder removal.
Oh gosh, how'd
Oh
that go?
yeah. Well, actually, once it was out, pretty good. The getting to the emergency room and realizing that
Oh,
like
yeah,
something serious was going on was not so fun.
that's not fun.
Yeah, and I've had I had a previous laparoscopic surgery as well, and so I have these little scars now, on
Yeah,
my abdomen, and I look at them every day and say thank you.
yeah.
Um, and actually, I'm about to have another surgery coming up. That's but
Mm.
another topic for another time. And I told my partner that when that one's done too, that I think I'm going to go get little hearts and like X's and O's tattooed around all of my scars. So
Yeah, sometimes folks do some tattoo work around scars.
yeah, not to cover them, but actually
Yeah, just to like,
to highlight them.
yeah,
Yes, yeah,
exactly.
to be like, survival check mark here and here and here.
Yeah, look, I made it.
Mm-hmm.
My body healed.
Yes, bodies are amazing.
Yeah,
Like I've always thought that, but going through that surgery from, in the ER, oh, this is happening tomorrow, to like, yes, with the help of some painkillers, but still to be like 3 days later, going home and getting myself out of bed and just being like,
right.
wow, like what a miracle.
And many kudos to the surgeons who pull that stuff off. It's quite, people are like, I could never dissect people. I'm like, me neither. I'm not a surgeon. I'm a anatomist, so I dissect cadavers. It's very different than the
Mm-hmm.
surgeon who has to work with that whole person and see them through it to more life. So I have a huge respect for surgeons, even while I'm, a connoisseur of scar tissue at this point and have many tips that I might offer to surgeons, and not only to surgeons, but to people who've had surgeries, and how
Mm-hmm.
important it is to actually, go into those spaces and places, go into those scars, and get help with
Mm-hmm.
scars so that they heal well and continue to be of service without, you know, causing disruptions down the line.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that this might be a good time to start to dive into some of the topic at hand, which would be fascia.
Oh, fascia.
Fascia. Fascia. I don't know how people say
Fascia.
it. Fascia. So I've
Fascia is
always
more like the spot on the, you put on
on
the
the
side of a
house.
building,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
But
It's the
before
same
we,
word, actually. It's the same concept. It's just pronounced differently. And so we use it differently in our language.
I know that because every time I have to Google how to spell it, because I have dysgraphia, I get 99%, stuff about houses. So I always have to put of the body when I'm searching it. Otherwise, otherwise,
Just type
um,
fascia Gil Hedley and you'll get the
there we
right
go.
fascia.
There we go. 100%. Before we dive into a few questions I have about fascia, though, I wanted to ask you, what's a somanot?
What's a somanot?
It's on your
So
website.
yeah, somanot
It's a
is,
cool term.
yeah, a somanot is a person who is committed and dedicated to exploring inner space in the same way that an astronaut is committed and dedicated to exploring outer space.
Love it.
So, soma is a Greek word for body. Sarx would be like flesh, soma would be body. And then naut is the root for to sail or navigate. So, like a sailor. So, a somonaut is like a body sailor or someone who navigates inner space. And I made up that word a long time ago when I was the editor of the Rolf lines, the Journal of the Rolf Institute. I came straight out of my PhD into Rolfing, and they were like, damn, we got a brainy one here. Let him edit the journal. I'm like, oh, if I must. So while I spent a couple of years as editor of the Rolf Lines Journal, I interviewed Emily Conrad Daoud at the time, who was the founder of Continuum Movement, a wonderful person, shamanist, healer, based in California, but from New York. And I took her course, like a 5-day workshop, and did an interview with her for the Rolfers. And I was like, how do I describe this woman? What is she doing, really? And to me, Somanat summed up Emily in a nutshell. And so I called her a Somanat. She loved it and called herself a Somanat years after that. And every once in a while, I get an email from a Continuum person saying, do you know anything about this word Somanat? Emily used it. I was like, I know a little bit about it. And then I realized I was a Somanat in my work in the lab, that I was just exploring inner space and moving around there and really becoming a different person as a result of it. It's a transformative process. So I was like, I think I'm a Somanat. And I was like, who else are the Somanats out there? I thought about, people like, what's that lovely lady from Northampton? She's a PT. She's not in Northampton anymore. I think she's out west. She might be in Ashland now. She's got a whole group of people. They are inner space explorers. But anyway, basically, anyone who took my class, I'm like, you're a Somanat. And so I ended up, making patches, Somanat patches.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Okay, I'm gonna have to get one of those.
Yeah, that's a Somanat patch.
Very cool.
So yeah, I named my business Somanotics. My website was Somanotics Workshops. And then now everybody's a Somanat. Now there's a Polish heavy metal band called Somanat.
Really? Now that I'll also have to check out.
And their studio is called Fuzztopia.
For real?
Yeah. So the words have kind of made it out into popular culture a little bit.
Oh my goodness. I'm going to have to check that out.
And I just let it run because, you can trace it back to me if you looked at it, but it's got a little bit of a life of its own at this point.
And just in like completely different communities too.
Yeah.
Cool. So each of these questions, of course, I'm not expecting you to do a massive deep dive on a podcast into. So just whatever you think is your
I go deep. So you're going to have to, throw a line and, gaff me.
Well, it's up to you, my friend. I have time. But I think the best place maybe to start, and I realize that this is not a light, easy, quick question, is, so what is fascia?
Yeah, no, that's a fair question. Really, because you can look it up in a dictionary and it'll say one thing, or you can go to a community that cares about a certain tissue and they'll say another thing.
Mm-hmm.
You can go to the Congress that's formed around the fascial community, right? And they'll say other things. But basically, if you want to be super technical, fascia is an aggregate of connective tissue that can be dissected into a sheet. Very, very base description that wraps other tissues in the body. So it's a body tissue, and it falls into the category of body tissues that we call connective tissue. So sometimes people will use the words fascia and connective tissue interchangeably, but from a just slightly more technical perspective, they're not really interchangeable. Connective tissue is a broad category.
Mm-hmm.
In the taxonomy of anatomy, there are 4 tissues: muscle tissue, nervous tissue, epithelial tissue, and connective tissue. And so when you're building the taxonomy of anatomical structures, fascia falls under the category of connective tissue. So all fascia are connective tissues, but not all connective tissues are fascia. So blood is in the category of connective tissue, bone is in the category of connective tissue, but we wouldn't call either of them fascia because they're not dissectable into sheets. So it's some of the more sheety structures in our body, and they only become sheety as a result of a knife. So it's a conceptualization of a tissue
Right.
because there are no sheets of anything in your body. There's just a body and it's one embryo differentiated into all these complex structures, some of which, when we put a knife to them, can be made into sheets. So you can't really make a rectus femoris into a sheet unless you smash it down with a mallet and turn it into a sheet. But the fascia lata, the fibrous connective tissue sleeve surrounding your thigh, I can cut that into a sheet. So we call it a fascia.
And then I know that there's a lot of talk about different kinds of fascia. And of course, that again could be like a whole
There's a lot of
thing.
talk from me about different kinds of fascia.
Yes, I've seen some videos. And so is it plausible to do a brief, maybe just brief overview of some of the different kinds of fascia? I guess that would be the most relevant to a yoga community.
Yeah. So if we're going to just sort of make this big category fascia, then it too could be potentially broken down into different categories. So mostly when people think of fascia, they tend to think of what we call deep fascia or the fascia profunda. So the sort of whitish, opaque, dense, regular fibrous fascia that have stringy bits in them that are at cross purposes to each other often and form in different patterns under the adipose layer and around the muscle tissues. That would even include the septa, that form between the muscle tissues, which are just continuations. So if we have a wrapping around this way, it's also going in and looping in towards the bone. So all of that structural element, which I call exoskeleton or deep fascia, maybe one type of fascia. So let's say a connective tissue plane that's organized with collagen fibers that are very linear and layered. So let's say that's the dense regular fibrous fascia or deep fascia, but is that all? Right? That's not all. That's an abstraction of tissues in the body, and we can do other abstractions. So Camper, the English anatomist, when he dissected the belly wall, right, and removed the dermis and the epidermis layer, the tough skin layer, and found this adiposal layer underneath it, and dissected that whole adiposal layer as a sheet. They call it Camper's fascia. And so by extension, Camper's fascia, is a whole body covering. It doesn't stop at your abdomen, right? That's just where he cut it and put down his flag and his name to call it Camper's fascia. Now, an Italian anatomist approached that same belly wall, dissected away the superficial segment of the adipose, found a membrane inside of it and more adipose underneath that membrane, and called that membrane superficial fascia. So that was Scarpa. So Scarpa was an Italian anatomist who identified a membrane within the belly wall as superficial fascia, where Camper's fascia, Henry Gray called superficial fascia. So the English anatomist called the whole fatty layer all over the body superficial fascia. And I picked up on their terminology, being an English speaker, reading English anatomy books, and Gray's Anatomy Oxford edition online being the standard of nomenclature for most of my career. I just called that fatty layer superficial fascia, and I can dissect it into, it's an aggregate of connective tissue that can be dissected into a sheet. I've demonstrated this on camera many times. So, and yet now the nomenclature has shifted, as has politics in Europe and England. And so now the European nomenclature is more ascendant, and they'll say superficial fascia is that membrane within. So more types of fascia. You can reference and be correct in the English anatomy tradition, the adiposal layer as a fascial layer. You can dissect it into an aggregate sheet, and it holds form. It conducts force. It's an interesting tissue. I've spent a lot of my career studying it. So that would be a type of fascia whose consistency being lobular and fatty and having having differential movement even within itself, right? There's a lot more structure to that than in just a sheet of fascia profunda or deep fascia. It's a very different kind of fascia. People say, well, is fat fascia? I'm like, well, not necessarily, but it can be. It can be structured into a sheet, and fascia can hold adipose. Adipocytes are connective tissue cells. So that's a type of fascia. Now, that membrane there, turns out there's not only one place you can find membrane in the body. It turns out that grid of the deep fascia is actually embedded in membrane. And you can see it under a microscope. It's really cool. There's this slippery junk on top of top of those spaghetti string fibers, and the membrane penetrates through the holes, the interstices between the fibers. You get to the other side of it, and there's more slippery stuff on the other side. And if you have any skill with a knife, and I can teach it to anyone in 5 minutes, you can cut that membrane into a sheet. And so I call that membrane perifascia. Perifascia because it's around the other fascia. It's a fascia. Perifascia.
Love it.
So whenever I see a membrane in the body, that's the box that I put it into. And there are membranes everywhere that there's differential movement between tissues in the musculoskeletal system. So if I'm one muscle fasciculi, like the rectus femoris, shearing over the vastus intermedius below it, right on the femur bone there, then that shearing is possible only because the fibrous wrapping of this muscle and the fibrous wrapping of this muscle tissue are continuous with each other through a superhydrated, filmy membrane, which if I take those muscle tissues apart with my hands, I see cotton candy when I pull them apart. I call that cotton candy fuzz. When I first started doing dissection, I had never seen it. I didn't have any vocabulary for it. I didn't see a picture of it in a book, so I had to just call it like I saw it. It looked fuzzy. So I call it the fuzz, and I put my finger in there, and now I have differentiated rectus femoris from vastus intermedius, right? And now I have my muscles, right? But it took me some years to realize that I was destroying a membrane.
Right.
And that membrane itself is an anatomical structure of fascia. And with some practice over 10 years, I could dissect that membrane itself. Took me 10 years, and I can teach you in 5 minutes, I guarantee you. So that membrane that I call perifascia has different movement properties and different structural. So if the superficial fascia is lobular and the dense regular fibrous fascia is a kind of a wrappy kind of a dense membrane, then the perifascia is a slippery membrane. So much more water volume. And the fiber organization is completely different from the other two. One's lobular, one's a grid. This one is like felt. Smaller, shorter fibers that are tossed down in a soupy pile and that tangle up with each other and make kind of a foggy layer if it's dry. And it's distensible in every direction because of the fiber organization. The distensibility of the dense regular fibrous fascia is very limited based on the structural weave of the tissues. But the perifascia allows for differential movement. It's what allows shearing. So I make that distinction: superficial fascia, perifascia, dense regular fibrous fascia, or deep fascia. And then you can go within those categories, right? And break it down some more, because sometimes the superficial fascia is fluffier or denser in some area of the body, or the organization of the lobules is very regular or irregular. You can go to the perifascial membranes and find sometimes they're thicker and foggier, and sometimes they're more wet, but never having strings going through them. And the dense regular fibrous fascia, sometimes there's one layer of strings and they're spread apart. Sometimes the strings are close together. Sometimes the strings are stacked. Sometimes they're stacked and spread apart. Sometimes they're stacked and tight. Sometimes there's a third layer, but I ran out of hands.
For
And
those of you
so,
just listening, you'll have to watch the video.
yeah, so you can look throughout the dense regular fibrous fascia category and find difference within it, or the membranous perifascia and find difference within it, or the fluffy adiposal tissues and find difference within them. So that's just a little head start on types of fascia and their differences. This is how I categorize it. Someone else can categorize it some other way. I think it's a decent categorization. It helps me explain the body, and that's what a model or does. It helps you explain what you're looking at, and it's not to say it can't be contradicted somehow.
So if you were trying to do, whether it be body work or your own work, a yoga practice or something, because one of the things that we'll often hear in yin circles, and I think that the reason that it gets said this way is just to try to keep things very simple for anyone who doesn't understand or want to understand their fascia in depth. But we'll often say that one of the things that's unique about yin yoga, they'll say, is that its ability to affect deep fascia because of the long holds, the stillness, and the kind of moderation of the sensation. And so I'm wondering, do you think that there are certain kinds of fascia that are better nurtured with movement versus some that might benefit more from stillness? Or is it impossible to even, I mean, obviously we need to be doing both, move and still, right? Yin and yang.
Yeah,
but
if you just do yin yoga, I don't think that's the original intent.
No,
right?
no.
Because you don't want to stretch yourself into a unreconstitutionable puddle.
Yeah, I mean, you have to move too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yin should be balancing yang. If you're all yin, you're up the creek.
Yeah. So is there any accuracy then to that statement that yin yoga affects deep fascia by, I think it's by basis of comparison of like movement forms of yoga?
Very interesting question.
Isn't it?
I've pondered it along with my yin friends, as opposed to in opposition to them, or it's an interesting question, because how do we describe the feelings and experiences and changes that happen? And is that happening? Is that a fascia thing? And I like to say, before I go into this, hold your good practices dearly, and the stories you tell about them very lightly.
Excellent.
So if you're doing your thing and it's doing the thing for you that you're wanting to feel or do, keep doing it, regardless of whether your story is accurate or not. And the story may change over time. As we learn more about fascia, we may say different things about it. When I was, this is a side, but not irrelevant. When I was at the Rolf Institute, there was a story about deep fascia and how Rolfing works. We would say, oh, when you lean your elbow on somebody's fascia lata, you induce the thixotropic effect. The thixotropic effect is basically a sol gel transition, and that where under pressure, something in a gel state turns into solution, goes into solution, liquefies, at which point it's malleable in a way that it could suffer the manipulations of the Rolfer's hands and be, as a plastic medium, reshaped into another way that may be more optimal for that person. That would be the hope and intention. Robert Schleip did some math and was like, it's impossible. You're not inducing the thixotropic effect in deep fascia with the pressure that can be given by an elbow. You'd have to be an elephant standing on top of a person, not a human with an elbow. It's insufficient pressure can be delivered from one human to another to induce a thixotropic effect. So something else has to be going on there.
Right.
And yet that was the theory we had been taught. And then he challenged that, and we kind of stopped talking about it because we're like, oh, we're not doing that. What are we doing? Now, I have ideas about what they're doing, but with respect to your question about the yin yogis and what they're doing to the deep fascia with their long holds, And the question is, what's long, right? 5, 10 minutes. I literally stay the same dissection position for 7 hours in a day. So I've always considered myself to be the ultimate yin yogi because I'll hold a posture for hours and hours and hours for weeks and months and sometimes years on end and pay for it harshly. But the deep fascia in certain directions is there as a restraint on your skeleton.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, the IT band, right, going from your iliac crest to, your knee, is there to resist the pulling apart of your skeleton. You don't want to lengthen that, in my opinion, particularly. If you're feeling untoward tension in it, go strengthen the other side of your body because it's probably making up for weakness somewhere else in your body, right? Go to the opposite side of your thigh, go to the opposite side of your body and see if there isn't something weak rather than trying to lengthen something that's tight because it doesn't fit into your concept of what it should feel like. And then your conclusion is it should be longer. It's like people who think I have cellulite and it shouldn't be there, so I'm going to beat it with an instrument. And you're like, look, it went away. Actually, your leg is swollen. Oh, it came back. Your leg is no longer swollen.
Mm-hmm.
I have to beat it again because it came back. It's confusion, right? So similarly, if I put IT band under a microscope and pull on it, it doesn't lengthen. And this is good. It's holding you together. It's doing its job. Now, if you expand your thigh by flexing your thigh, that same IT band will broaden because the fibers in the other direction are elastic, not in the long plane. And so you can, so now you're doing your yin yoga thing, right? And and it is true that under tension, forces going through a fascia has been proven in a laboratory can induce the relaxation of myofibroblasts in the tissue because it's the demand being placed upon the tissue. And how long does that take to change? It takes a while. And does it stay? It depends on your pattern of movement. So if you do your yin yoga thing, is it going to change, say, the length of the IT band between your knee and your hip? I hope not.
I was going to say, hopefully not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your skeleton's going to fall apart. It's your exoskeleton. You don't really want to do that. That being said, there's a whole lot of other tissues in the body, where you're talking to your nervous system when you're doing that long stretch. You are also talking to your fascia. I'm not saying you're not. You're talking to that perifascia, you're talking to that superficial fascia, and you're talking to that deep fascia. You're talking to all of them. You're talking to the whole body. Your whole nervous system is being taught something when you, in a peaceful way, engage the tissue in that way. Because in a certain sense, you're straining it, right? You're putting it under duress and asking something of it. And the way that each of those different types of fascia are going to respond a little differently to that, because some of them are more about movement and some of them are more about stability. Right? And you need stability to have movement. There has to be a ground to push off of, right? It's a basic dance principle in modern dance, stability relative to movement. All the movement happens from some stable point in your body. So, what are the stable points when you're doing a yin yoga activity? And what's being asked to move? And if what's being asked to move is the muscle tissue, how is it shearing relative to itself within its bundle based on the texture of the perifascia? Is it going into solution from that hold? What are your nervous tissues reporting to both your reflexive spinal column as well as the higher movement centers, when you put under the tissue under stress in such a way as to say, be longer, right? So certain motor nerve partnerships are going to say, oh, we can turn off. We don't have to be on. And they're going to turn off in the face of that demand, and they'll be lengthening in the soft tissues. They're going to be Golgi tendon organs and various receptors in the tendons that say, oh, I'm being asked to be longer, and I'm not afraid of falling over right now. I have a stable base on the ground here. So it's okay. I can do this. I can be longer and the tower's not going to topple over. If you ask that same lengthening with a mallet on your knee, your leg goes flying up to accommodate for that. But you don't get a spinal reflex like that when you're doing yin yoga. You're sneaking up on it, not with a mallet, but with an intention, right? So each tissue is going to respond a little differently given its role in maintaining your body's shape and functioning. Each tissue is going to respond a little differently to that demand that you place upon it, including the muscle tissue, the motor nerve unit partnerships, the perifascia's shearing potential, the deep fascia's stability potential.
And the nervous system.
So it's complicated.
So the answer is often in yin yoga, well, yes, no, and it depends.
Yeah, well, I like that. Yeah. And I have found the yin yoga folks to be super smart and considerate. I've never found anyone with a particularly simplistic take on it. Paul and Joe Fee and Bernie Clark and Susie, the whole gang of them are incredibly smart and considerate people. So I have huge respect for their own research into it, and they've done some of it with me in the lab, and so we're all thinking about it together. And as tempting as it would be to simplify it and say, well, it's stretching your deep fascia, I don't find any of them succumbing to that temptation because I think they all recognize how complicated a story it is to be told. And yet, why not say that? Just, do we have to be absolutely accurate in our stories if it helps people to engage their body in a way that helps them? Right. Yeah, so in other words, that gets back to the hold your good practices dearly in the stories you tell about them lightly. So it's like, here's our best guess at what's going on here. And science might prove otherwise in some time, but don't stop doing yin yoga because the story we told wasn't perfect. No stories are perfect.
I think for me, the only usefulness of sort of even trying to explain I'm talking to students, not teachers per se, but if I'm teaching a drop-in class and someone's never done yin before, I need some sort of simple way to explain why when they come out of this yin pose, this feels way different than when they just did their vinyasa flow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes just saying that it impacts the fascia in a different way is kind of the easiest way to summarize that.
Yeah. And it will still go over their head because they don't want to know what fascia is.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, and the fascial system is another word that we use in our community because we kind of defined a fascia, and I offered that definition. And then the fascial system is a more kind of inclusive and elaborate story of the connective tissues of the body in relationship to one another. So the fascial system is not just going to be the wrapping, but the septa plus the tendon plus the, so we kind of bigged up the fascia story with our definition of the fascial system, which I was on a committee and I couldn't recite it to you. We made such a long definition. I'd have to look it up in the journal myself.
I think that sometimes too, another thing that's often said, and I just always think as a yoga teacher, if you're saying something to the general public as a way of simplifying it, as a beginning point to them understanding, if they're interested in more, you can give them more. If not, they just understand this is why this feels different.
Yeah.
But one thing that is often said, unfortunately, in yin circles is that, well, sorry, trying not to laugh as I say it. Well, yin yoga doesn't work on the muscles. It only works on the fascia, which to me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but that's impossible. Because is not there this thing called myofascia? And so is there not fascia around our muscles, in our muscles, around every compartment, segment, et cetera, of our muscles? So how can you say you're working with fascia, but not working with the muscles? Now,
yeah, you can
only
touch the whole person. You can only move the whole person. You can only engage the whole person. That being said, we can be specific with our touch. We can do movements that engage muscle tissue in an abstracted sense differently than fascial tissue. Look into Robert Schleip's fascial fitness stuff. And there are, you can train tendons as opposed to training muscle tissue. So we can shift our emphasis, but to say you could exclusively do something like that would be a little silly.
Yeah. So, and I think again, I often think what happens in these kinds of situations is a case of the telephone game where, they go to a training.
I just literally had that exact thought.
Yes, I know, because I've had people in my trainings come back and say things where I'm like, that is not at all what I said. Actually, it's like,
I have a whole career of that. I mean, like I'm seeing like quotes on Facebook with flowers around them. Gil Hedley. I'm like, I never said that.
Yes. So
there's literally no chance in hell that I said this. Like with poor Einstein, they're always Einstein has said it all.
And Buddha too.
Yeah, the Buddha. Yeah, that was a busy
Yeah.
time under the tree, man. People were just writing down quotes.
Yeah. So I think that the reason I wanted to bring that up is that I think that if the telephone game has happened where the teacher says that, yin yoga has more of an emphasis on fascia and it's not working the muscles in a way that a yang practice would, which it isn't. You're not like pumping yourself up and like getting, strong. They may have heard that. And then now it gets turned into,
it gets reduced
to, you're not accessing your muscles in a yin practice. You're just accessing.
They work on muscles. We work on fascia. It's like,
sorry. So I just wanted to bring that up because I know that that's something that is.
No, it's a valuable clarification. But again,
constantly said in groups on Facebook. It's like,
always.
How are you accessing the fascia without accessing that muscle is what I would like to know.
Yeah, we can't really. But
so then in that case, you were talking about that shearing, which you were showing with your hands. So anyone who can't see it, to me, it kind of looks like a gliding that allows the body parts to.
I would distinguish the words gliding and shearing.
Okay.
With respect to anatomical mechanics.
Okay. So the difference being?
The difference being both have to do with differential movement.
Okay.
So things going in different directions relative to each other in your body is differential movement, right? So if you squeeze your hand, some tissues seem to be going north and other ones seem to be going south. There's different directions of tissue movement happening simultaneously and adjacent to each other. So how does that happen? Like a tree can't do that, right? You go up to a tree, grab it by the bark, and try and schlop it around. It doesn't go anywhere. There's a fibrous continuity that doesn't allow for there to be differential movement. But in our bodies, the miracle of locomotion that we enjoy on this planet is because nature figured out how to have differential movement between the tissues and not just how to stick them next to each other stuck. So I differentiate different types of ways that nature accomplishes differential movement in the human body and in other mammals. Basically, we have shearing and we have gliding. So shearing is when we have that perifascia, right, as an intervening continuity between the tissues that are moving. And that perifascia being superhydrated and organized in such a way that it can distend in any particular direction allows those tendons to be pulling muscle tissues in opposite directions at the same time without tearing you apart. Or without failing because there's a fibrous connection rather than a membranous one. And then there is no movement. There's leverage instead, and the bone moves based on the leverage, right? So if we have a fibrous connection between tissues, we have leverage. If we have a membranous connection between tissues, we have shearing, right? Shearing is the distension of the tissues in different directions while continuous through a fascia.
Cool.
Gliding is what we see in the viscera, where we have organ shapes that have a particular type of fascial covering that leaks a juice called serous fluid. So there's a mesothelial cell layer on the surface of the fascia of the organs that produces a fluid. So instead of having there be perifascia between your liver and your stomach that shears when you breathe, causing them to move in different directions from each other. Instead, you have a fluid between your liver and your stomach, and they glide on each other.
Thankfully.
On a good day, right?
Yeah.
So gliding is what I would use to describe a hockey puck going over the ice.
Gotcha.
Right. And there's water, a little film of water in between. And anyone who plays hockey knows that the quality of that film of water will change the way the puck moves over the ice, right? So the puck could get frozen to the ice. Then that would be an adhesion, right? So the liver and the stomach can get stuck to each other. We'd call that an adhesion because now you do have a fascial connection between those visceral surfaces rather than a fluid one. So now you don't have gliding. You might have shearing if that adhesion is distensible, but it might not even be that. They may just get glued to each other. You tear them apart and the organ tears, because the adhesion is so strong. So I call true gliding or true gliding to be differential movement based on a fluid, and shearing to be differential movement based on a distensible membrane that I call perifascia that is the intervening tissue between other tissues that are moving relative to each other.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
I don't know. I might be the only person who makes that distinction. So, I don't know if you'll find that in a book, but I found that to be the best way to describe what I was observing in the body as a somnonaut. And you can lose that differential movement either because, as just described, you can have adhesions between organs, or you can also have changes in the quality of the perifascia in the musculoskeletal system, so that instead of being slippery, a slippery fascia, it becomes a gummy fascia. Or instead of being a gummy fascia, it becomes a crystalline connection.
Okay.
Yeah, so there can be degrees of potential differential movement based on how long you've been sitting on your ass. If you sit on your ass forever, things will get stuck. If you sit on your ass for an hour and then you stand up, it'll get juicy again.
Okay. Okay. So I wanted to talk just briefly, if we can do it briefly. If we not can't, let me know.
Again, you can gaff me at any time.
Another thing we often hear in yin circles is that fascia doesn't respond, like you don't need to warm fascia up. That like there's this delineation somewhere between, you don't do warm-ups in yin because fascia doesn't respond to that increased body temperature. And again, the telephone game here has happened. And what I think, and I'll eventually, when I talk to Bernie Clark, I'll ask him, because it's often him that's being misquoted in my view. Telephone game again. Yeah. From him saying probably something like, you don't need to warm up to do yin yoga, has probably now turned into, we don't do any active or yang or warm-ups before yin because it's like bad somehow. Any thoughts on that?
I think there's been some research on that whole warm up to stretch issue and whether you can do ballistic movements out of the gate or not. And it's all very interesting and over my head, frankly. And if Bernie says something, I tend to trust it because Bernie goes so far down the rabbit hole.
He does, yes.
I mean, he is like 12 feet down the rabbit hole and still burrowing. Everyone forgot what the question is, and Bernie is
Yes.
Bernie's going to come out of some prairie dog hole 400 miles from that rabbit hole with the answer in his teeth.
I'll maybe save that one for him then. But I think it's just again a question of the telephone game where people hear part of what someone says, and
And you know something, stuff goes back and forth too over time as different research comes out.
Yeah.
I have found. So, for instance, I have a heart murmur, and you go to the dentist and get your dental work done and go home. And then at one point they said, oh my gosh, you have a heart murmur. You can't get dental work done without getting antibiotics first because it's going to do some terrible thing to your heart. And then about 15 years went by. I didn't go to the dentist for 15 years. I think it was 17 years actually. And then they were like, don't worry about it. That research has been overturned.
Yeah.
So I'll just lay that down there as a concept to work with. So there might have been a study done that led folks to say a thing, and then maybe 10 years from now, we'll study it again some more and say the opposite. That's kind of how things go.
Okay, I'm going to try to do a couple more questions before I have to let you get back to work. Some of these I think we've already answered just in your discussion. Is there a relationship between, this one's very specific to perimenopause and menopause, to hormones and how that affects your fascia?
Absolutely.
I mean, as a menopausal woman, I can say from lived experience, yes.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll just direct you. See, I can do quick answers too. I'll direct you to Carla Stecco's work.
Thank you.
Hormones and fascia. Carla is a very thoughtful and ingenious researcher and friend, Italian person working at University of Padua, does all kinds of research and has put out some nice research articles on fascia and hormones and
Brilliant.
women. Yeah.
Good way to pass the ball. Thanks, Gil.
Yeah.
I will research that also and add that in the resources.
Yeah, Carla's awesome. She's super sciencey too. She really knows her stuff.
Now, this is a brilliant question, but I think there's no way we can answer it in short. So maybe I'll have you back sometime to discuss the relationship between fascia and the nervous system, because that's huge, I'm sure. Is there anything that
they are related?
They are.
They are related.
Super related. I know.
Yeah. It's fun. It's during the NERV project, which I was 5 months in the lab last year, just focusing on nervous tissues. And we'd be like, is that a nerve? Is this nervous tissue or fascia? And we'd be like, yeah.
Both. Yeah.
Yeah. In other words, people will be like, are nerves fascia? And then you get into that mix up between connective tissue and fascia, right? But I can unsheathe the nerve and turn its sheath into a fascia, right? By that strict definition of an aggregate of connective tissue that can be dissected into a sheet. But also, there's no such thing as a neuron without connective tissue.
Right.
So what is a nerve but a composite of tissues? Right, that includes nervous tissue, connective tissue, epithelium, and the vessel walls that are in the nerve, etc. So all the tissues are there.
I've got a couple here that I think are obvious from what we've discussed so far. So is there anything, I heard somebody say that the fuzz, so to speak, is only visible in cadavers and doesn't really exist in live humans.
That pisses me off so much.
That I'm glad I asked you, because you can Vent.
Well, here's the thing about the fuzz. So the fuzz, of
How could it
course,
just randomly appear?
it. I've had people
People are,
saying it just grows in cadavers. I'm like,
it doesn't make any
I mean,
sense. How can
nothing's
something
growing in a
grow in
cadaver.
the cadaver? Yeah.
No, it is an artifact. Say you embalm tissue, right? That's a desiccant. So even though there's fluid in an embalmed body, the fluid itself is a cooker. It's a chemical pickling of the tissues that results in changes in their texture. So all the tissues change in texture. The skin, the superficial fascia, the deep fascia, the muscle tissues, the organs, they all change in texture as a result of embalming, as does the perifascium.
Mm-hmm.
The perifascia gets desiccated. It's not as slippery. It's more
Mm-hmm.
dry. And so when I pull that one muscle fasciculi away from another muscle fasciculi, I see that cotton candy. Now, if I didn't put it in tension, there'd be no cotton candy. So you could say it doesn't exist, but because in a sense, the fuzziness of it is an artifact of putting it in tension. But those same fibers are there when it's collapsed. They're just organized differently.
Just because you don't see them doesn't mean they aren't there.
Exactly. It's like, you're not there, Nick. You're gone. You don't exist. So then if I don't place the tissues in tension, those same fibers are still there. They're just not torn apart. They're in their normal physiological and anatomical position and relationship. So they're there. Now, if I didn't embalm the body, they'd be wetter. They'd be slipperier, literally to your touch. They'd be slipperier because I changed the texture with the chemistry. But when I work on unfixed bodies, if I take that same muscle fasciculi and lift it off of the other one, it's wetter. But if you look real close, you can see those itty bitty strings because
Still
I'm
there.
still tearing the tissue apart. But when I tear it, it's wet and it collapses on itself like a wet hanky. And so it doesn't mean it's not there. It just responds differently to the tension placed upon the tissue when it's in a more hydrated state. Now, let's go to our living bodies. If I am a surgeon and I'm dissecting those same tissues on a living body, we don't normally take tissues apart in the way that we do in dissection and you do in surgery. Surgeons tend to cut through things or sneak through them or sneak under them, but they have to encounter the exact same thing I encounter in an unfixed body, which is a wet membrane that I'm tearing apart. If you look at Jean-Claude Gumberto's videos, strolling under the skin, etc.
I love those.
What he's doing is he's sticking a camera inside of hand tissue that's being pulled apart.
Mm-hmm.
He's destroying it the same way I do in a dissection and show you the fuzz. He's showing you the fuzz when it's wet in a living body.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when he takes his camera out and the tissues collapse back onto each other and heal, did it go away?
No, it
vanished. It's just wet
abracadabra
in position. So it's there no matter what. It's an intrinsic part of the human body. It's a membrane. And when you tear it apart, the artifact is the appearance of strandedness where there is no strandedness unless you're being torn apart by drawn and quartered on the rack. But it's there. The tissue is there. You're just placing it under different conditions.
Right.
Same tissue, different conditions.
I'm glad we got a chance to address this.
Yeah, the tissue is always there. It's just what are the conditions under which you're observing it?
I think maybe as a way to start to wrap it up so that you can have some work time today. Maybe we'll close.
I can feel my throat. I got all excited there.
I know. Oh. Can we maybe close with a few fun and maybe a little bit soulful rapid fire questions? Are you game for that?
Sure.
Not at all related to fascia, just related to you.
Oh,
okay. I know, right?
Terrifying.
It's not at all. Coffee or tea?
Coffee, but decaf.
Okay.
But 100% Swiss water processed decaf that has no chemicals and no caffeine, zero caffeine.
So it's for the flavor.
Tea is dumb. Tea is like weird water. I don't know why anybody drinks it. It's so gross.
Oh, I love both. I refuse to choose.
Sorry, England.
Very favorite ice cream flavor?
Oh, favorite ice cream flavor. Huh. Uh, in the past, I would have said coffee. But I think I'm gonna go for one of those like cookie dough ones or something like that.
Nice. One thing people get wrong about me.
They think I'm a scientist. It's hysterical. I'm a sculptor.
Ooh, I love it. An artiste.
Yes, exactly.
Do you have a pop culture vice? Like a show you binge or like a movies,
A pop culture vice. How much time do we have?
Just pick one. Just one.
Okay, I'll pick one pop culture vice. Um, Currently, we're watching what is that show? We're watching, it's one of those space shows. Uh I don't even know the name of it.
You're like, no, I can't think of it.
It's like a Western Star Trek or something. It's kind of fun.
Okay. Well, if you think of the name of it, let me know. Sounds right up my alley. Um, when I'm not in the lab or speaking on tour, you'll find me.
Oh, uh moving wood around.
Nice.
I have a wood fireplace in my office, and so I have to I have to I take down a lot of
Trees.
trees and such that need to be removed for whatever reason, and I slice them up and chop them up and turn them into firewood.
It's a
And
good
thank the
workout.
tree for the capturing all that sunshine for me.
Um, what the world needs now is
Oh my gosh, more right brain thinking,
love
more
it.
resting in the wholeness of vision that the right brain has rather than the reduction of people to types.
Thank you. Love it. One thing I wish people knew about fascia, and I realize that could be a whole episode, but just pick your like bone of contention, maybe, or
Yeah, there's more than one kind.
yes. Awesome. And then, of course, I'm going to put the links to all of your things, to your website, some of your videos, all of that, even your Instagram page in the
I'll
show
give you
notes.
one more though on that last one.
Okay.
It's not all about fashion.
It's one part of the whole.
Yeah.
Nice. So yeah, I'll put all your links to everything in the show notes. But is there anything that I forgot to ask you about that you feel like you really want to add?
Yeah. What am I doing for in the next 50 cities I'm going to visit in the next several months?
You're on tour like a rock star.
I'm
Tell us
on
about your
tour,
tour.
and I'm going to be bringing the anatomy of the nervous system in a holistic and integral perspective to another 50 cities in Canada and the US, all through the Northeast, as well as the far West and the Midwest.
When does it start
So,
again?
shortly, July 5th, we drive off to Minneapolis, and we'll be gone till October. I'll come home and teach a dissection class. We'll go out again November, December, and hit
Okay.
the far West. So
This will come out in September. So anybody who's listening to this in September, October,
yeah,
November.
we'll be hard at it September, November, and December. We'll be home October.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank
I
you,
hope,
Nick. It's great to meet you.
yeah, you too. We'll say our proper goodbyes in a moment as soon as I hit pause. But for those of you listening to the pod, bye for now.